The battle between the Radeon 6600 and the NVIDIA RTX 3060 is a perfect example of AMD and NVIDIA's ongoing competition to produce the best GPUs at various price points. Both of these cards are popular options for anyone who wants to experience 1080p gaming. Thus, the question arises, which gives a better performance at 1080p and which promises the best value? Stay with us as we examine these amazing GPUs side by side in terms of specs, performance, and more. Specifications. Comparing the specs of graphics card made by NVIDIA and AMD can be misleading because the two companies employ completely different designs. However, there are a few intriguing points to consider when regarding the build of both cards and how it affects the games that you play. With regard to the Radeon RX 6600, AMD's graphics card has a base clock speed of a little over 1600 MHz and a boost speed of a little over 2400 MHz, while the RTX 3060 boasts a base clock speed of 1320 MHz and a boost speed up to 1780 MHz. Posting lower numbers in both cases, NVIDIA does, however, have the advantage when it comes to RAM, offering 12 GB of GDDR6 memory as opposed to the RX 6600's 8 GB. The memory on the 3060 is also faster due to a higher memory bandwidth and a bigger memory interface. Stream processors and CUDA cores, for example, are not exactly comparable. The RTX 3060 features 3584 CUDA cores based on NVIDIA's Ampere architecture, and it uses an 8nm fabrication process from Samsung. On the other hand, the RX 6600 features 1792 stream processors based on RDNA 2.0 technology and uses a 7nm fab process from TSMC. Surprisingly, both of these cards have equal number of tensor cores and ray accelerators of 112 and 28 respectively. There's also similarity in the memory configuration of both cards that we can't fail to observe. Although the RTX 3060 has a higher RAM than its counterpart, they still both feature similar GDDR6 memories. GDDR6 offers more bandwidth and speed than its predecessors. It has a higher effective memory clock speed of 12,000 MHz compared to the 8,000 MHz we see in GDDR5, and a higher memory bandwidth of 192 GB per second versus 128 that GDDR5 features, despite having the same memory bus width of 128 bits. Now, let's talk a little bit about performance. The RTX 3060 and the RX 6600 both have feature sets that include DLSS, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, and ray tracing that differ and set them apart when it comes to performance. Let's explain this a little bit. Despite some gaps in their specifications, these GPUs are often intended for 1080p games, for which 8 GB of storage is sufficient with each card, also including a variety of features intended to boost its performance. When paired with ray tracing, NVIDIA's well-praised DLSS, which stands for Deep Learning Super Sampling technology, provides outstanding visual frame rate performance. While this comes as an improvement to its more outdated technology, the main point is that it can improve the visual quality of your games by rendering at a higher resolution before downscaling to meet the native resolution of your monitor. In addition to smart access memory that boosts speed when used with a compatible CPU, AMD now also offers a comparable resolution scaling capability dubbed Fidelity FX Super Resolution. When it comes down to how these cards performed in different titles and playing games at 1080p with max graphics settings, both cards delivered excellent 1080p experiences as promised, with one outperforming the other in some games. For instance, the 3060 GPU performed better in Cyberpunk 2077. Although both cards were still above 60 FPS at high settings, the 3060 had a 15.6% edge over the 6600 when it comes to an average frame rate at 1080p. The RX 6600 also fared admirably in Assassin's Creed Valhalla at 1080p resolution, as it achieves an average frame rate that is 6.4% faster than the RTX 3060. Likewise, the RX 6600 achieves 120 FPS in Forza Horizon 4 to noticeably outperform the RTX 3060. And here's a win for NVIDIA, as Days Gone performed better on the RTX 3060. While the 6600 still managed about 115 frames per second, the 3060 gained an additional 7% better average frame rate at 1080p settings. Similarly, Horizon Zero Dawn had the advantage on NVIDIA's GPU even with DLSS turned off. Although the difference was not so significant at just about 3 or 4 frames per second at 1080p, this proves that NVIDIA's cards has an edge when it comes to DLSS supported games. So turning on DLSS when playing these types of games will give the 360 an additional boost. Another test with Watchdog Legion was carried out with the DLSS ray tracing turned off to allow the AMD GPU to show off its raw performance. Observed results told that the RX 6600 competed head-to-head surprisingly in both 1080p and 1440p with the RTX 3060. Generally speaking, this performance disparity is to be expected in many games, with some of NVIDIA's favorite titles giving the 3060 a little bit more advantage. Even though the Radeon RX 6600 is generally slower than the RTX 3060, it is still a fantastic 1080p graphics card that supports high frame rates in the majority of games, even when DLSS is set to its highest setting. Now, let's examine how the ray tracing of both cards stand against each other with both DLSS and FSR disabled to create an equal match. Needless to say, NVIDIA surpassed AMD in this test, showing how pure hardware ray tracing is much more effective in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It's quite obvious that NVIDIA's ray tracing advantage would increase noticeably if DLSS and FSR were turned on for a supported game. In terms of 3D Mark's synthetic benchmarks, the RX 6600 outperformed the RTX 3060 with the exception of Time Spy and Port Royal, which evaluate ray tracing performance. This comes as no shock because we can quite all agree that NVIDIA's ray tracing is currently much more developed than AMD's. Now let's talk a little bit about the power consumption of both of these cards. For two cards that bring so much high-end gaming experience, they both have a TDP that hit below 200 watts. The 6600 comes with a TDP of 132 watts, and the RX 3060 has a TDP of 170 watts. The GPU from AMD is incredibly efficient as it is generally favored thanks to its lower power consumption. Believe it or not, this is also one of the reasons the RX 6600 has gained popularity among gamers and even cryptocurrency miners. It's just a much more effective GPU in terms of power consumption. In fact, this reduced power rating in the 6600 appears to make up for its lesser RAM offering, as it requires considerably less power from the PC it's installed in. For perspective, anyone who buys the 6600 only needs a 450 watt of minimum power supply, while the RX 3060 by comparison requires a PSU of at least 550 watts. So let's talk about pricing today between these two cards. Obviously, if you're watching this video a little bit later, you'll want to check more recent pricing, as that may adjust your decision. But currently, the MSRP is slowly becoming less of a yardstick to immediately measure the performance of these graphics cards, but it's still a pretty good place to start for general comparisons. Technically, the MSRP of both these graphics cards is $329. But chances of getting either GPU for sale at that price is very slim, as real-world pricing is considerably higher for both graphics cards. However, the 6600 comes cheaper than the 3060, while most custom versions of both cards are hovering in the $350 to $400 range. In the end, both GPUs are worthwhile to suggest for various reasons. If you already own an AMD machine, the 6600 is a great option, and the 3060 is an obvious choice for anyone who streams frequently or uses a G-Sync monitor. Also, if you really desire ray tracing and DLSS in your gaming experience at 1080p, then the 3060 is going to be a better option for you. And if you should go by the MSRP prices, the 3060 also wins in this scenario, although as we mentioned, those don't really come into play that much. However, AMD's 6600 is a winner if you want pure 1080p performance at a cheaper price, as it frequently performs similar to the RTX 3060 in non-ray tracing tasks. It goes without saying that NVIDIA still has the advantage in terms of added functionality, but AMD is clearly catching up. If you are more concerned with price to performance, the RX 6600 is the undisputed victor due to its cheaper cost. However, choosing the RTX 3060 will not result in any performance loss, and if you're more interested in utilizing the extra capabilities that NVIDIA has to offer, then that would be a reason to go with that card. So at the end of the day, guys, what do you think about these two cards? Are you in the process of deciding which one to buy? Which one are you going to choose? I hope the information in this video helped you make an educated decision. Lastly, if you're not sure about your budget, this video right here goes over the best graphics card option for different price points. So if the 6600 or the 3060 are not quite in your budget, please watch this video to give yourself some better ideas. Thanks for watching. Peace out.